Hello and welcome to the home of the Ghost Owl as we come to the end now, or near the end of our Dwarven faction focus in Warhammer the Old World, and we've got 3 more episodes to go. Over the next 2 episodes, this one and the next one, we're basically going to go through 2 sample army lists, 2,500 point army lists. These are the army lists kind of that I like to play in a sort of casual environment, pick up games, very much an all-comers, aiming to have a bit of fun, play with lots of different units. They're by no means min-maxed. And in terms of sharing them with you, trying to keep also the numbers of models where you've got units pretty consistent with what you might find in a box or 2 boxes. So trying to generally keep round numbers rather than min-maxing numbers, points, ranks, that sort of thing. It's more to be purchase-friendly and fun-friendly, fun for people to play against. And for me, that's the most important thing, is enjoying the game. This is by no means meant to be competitive or meta, so just to be clear. And it is also very much tailored for my style of gameplay, so please take that into account. Army lists are quite a personal thing, but sometimes I think it's nice to see a couple of sample lists of something that might look fun to play, particularly if you're relatively new to the faction or new to Warhammer the Old World. So first up then, Army List 1. So in terms of characters, taking a king, because I do like my kings, and that's a really nice looking model with the shield bearers. So king with shield and shield bearers, of course, with the rune of might, giving him that extra bit of strength. A rune lord, so that we've got at least a level 2 dispel in there, with a shield and full plate, just for that bit of durability. And importantly, a rune of spell breaking, essentially that automatic dispel, so that you can mitigate that critical enemy spell. A rune smith in there, again that's shield and full plate, but other than that, keeping him cheap, but making the most of the buffs and the fact you've got a bit of redundancy with a level 1 dispel in there as well. And then a Dwarven engineer, just with a handgun, again, keeping him relatively cheap to support war machines and quarrelers. So the total amount of points you're allowed for characters in a 2,500 point army list is 1,250. This is only 485. We've gone pretty cheap on the characters here. Normally, you kind of want to be around, I think, around about 25%. Personally, I know, and it's different for different armies. Some armies are really heavily reliant on characters, others less so. I think the Dwarves definitely fit into the category of being less so because of how solid their infantry and things are. They'll see every unit's gain benefits from buffs, but they're pretty solid across the board. So it's a little bit low overall on the points on characters, but I think there's enough there to do what we want. And actually, I say this is all about having fun, having different units to play with, and being fun for your opponents as well. So when we're looking at the core, we're taking 2 units of 15 quarrelers. They all have great weapons, so we've paid for that, and they're all veterans as well. And they all have the veteran, standard bearer, and musician, so they've all got their full command group. So great weapons, full command, 2 units of 15 quarrelers. And then rounding it out, because we've got our king, we're taking 20 longbeards as core with shields and their full command group. So giving us a nice bit of anvil unit there. So they are not taking the great weapons. These are hand weapon and shield longbeards. That gives us a total points of 638, so pretty close to the minimum allowed, but not always a bad thing because, again, for me in the Dwarves, the big part of their army list sits in the special category. So keeping the core cheap is a pretty common thing, and core, often seen as core tax. for the dwarves, the actual quarrelers and longbeards are pretty solid choices. It's just that's the way the points work out in this particular case, pretty close to the minimum. Okay, so moving on to some interesting part of the army, so special, right? So we're going in here with 20 Ironbreakers with their full command and drilled and the Rune of Confusion. So that's going to mean that anyone that charges them is going to be charging them disordered. And, you combine that with the Longbeard, you've got two really durable anvil-style units that you can slowly move up the board. They're gonna be tough to remove, and they're going to give something for the enemy to crash into, so that you can maximize the other parts that you have in the list. Also, 20 hammerers. I love the hammerers. They can put out the damage. They've got the full command. They've also got drilled, and they're taking the Master Rune of Hesitation, so that if they get charged, then the enemy the enemy unit doesn't count as charging for the purpose of their weapon selection and special rules, which I think is really nice, and especially given that if hammerers do get charged, they then get that +1 initiative and +1 attack, so that kind of helps as well. So potentially reducing the incoming damage while increasing their damage back. Though ideally, I'm going to be wanting the Ironbreakers and the Longbeards to be, taking the charges, getting into combat, and then charging the hammerers in to do that damage output. But certainly able to take it. We've got 3 really solid infantry blocks in there, but nothing that is like, we've not gone for like a major Death Star in one, so it's not like 40 hammerers or 40 Ironbreakers or anything crazy. So 3 solid infantry blocks supported by those crawlers with their crossbows, but also supported with some gyrocopters. I really like to have gyrocopters in the list. As I've said before, the dwarves, they do lack the mobility, and this is something that does give them that mobility. They've been upgraded with the brimstone guns just to give them something additional over those steam guns. The clatter guns are nice because of the move and shoot, but the brimstone guns offer that kind of higher strength output. And the clatter guns are actually quite a bit more expensive. So 3 gyrocopters in there, and then a cannon. The cannon's the only one thing in here that you might want to swap out for something like a grudge thrower, for example. But because I'm kind of using 3 big infantry blocks and I'm wanting to push them up the mid-board, they're going to get engaged. It's going to start reducing the targets for grudge throwers and the risk of scattering of the template and all that sort of thing if you're firing danger close to a unit that's obviously not engaged, but you can still risk the scatter and stuff like that. So for me, I think the cannon is filling a role that I don't really have elsewhere in here, which is, if there is a high toughness, behemoth monster thing out there, that's going to be the target of the cannon. That's going to take him obviously a few rounds, a few shots to deal with such a monster because of the lack of the multiple wounds, which we talked about previously. But that does bring us to a total of 1,077 points out of 1,250. I could easily spend way more than 1,250 in this section. More gyrocopters, grudge thrower, bolt thrower. So much to choose in special, not enough points to go round. But that's kind of where we sit with this. In the rare category, we got 10 Iron Drakes. We're taking the Iron Warden and a Standard Bearer. No Musician, that's because of points. And a Troll Hammer Torpedo on the Iron Warden. So that gives us kind of like a mini cannon on our Iron Warden. And these are going to be a detachment to the Ironbreakers. So, and the King will sit in the Hammerers. So you're going to have the King in the Hammerers. You're going to have a Rune Lord in the Ironbreakers. You're going to have the Runesmith in the Longbeards, so you're getting the buffs to both of those units. But the Ironbreakers are also going to get support from those Iron Drakes in terms of those Drake guns, and there's also the Troll Hammer Torpedo out there. And finally, to round it off, an Organ Gun. Again, just to beef up that shooting, we're going to need plenty of support for those 3 big infantry blocks. So that will take us to 297 points out of our 625. The rare category, not really one I find much competition, because the cost of most of the units in there, apart from the Iron Drakes and the Gyro Bomber, not crazy expensive. And the Gyro Bomber I'm not a big fan of. So overall, that's where we work out for the rare. That brings us to 2,497 points out of the 2,500. So just as a refresh then, so King goes in the unit of the Hammerers. You've got your Rune Lord goes in your Iron Breakers. Your Rune Smith goes in the Longbeards. And then obviously your Engineer babysitting the Organ Gun over the cannon, and that's because of the Organ Gun rolling the 2 artillery dice. Iron Drakes detachment to the Iron Breakers. Okay, I hope that was interesting as a sample army list for me. This is kind of an army that I really like to play. I like my sort of, say, big infantry blocks with my firepower support. But I do think it's important to have the gyrocopters in there for mobility. I mean, heck, I would have more gyrocopters if I could afford the points. And with clatter guns as well. There you go. I hope you've enjoyed it, though. I hope it's been useful for you. If it has, give it a thumbs up. If it wasn't, give it a thumbs down. And in the comments down below, let me know what you think about the army list overall. Please bear in mind, I'll say it again, this is not meant to be competitive meta. This is meant to be fun to play against. And it's also supposed to be an all-comers list. If you want to see more content, though, hit that subscribe button. It's totally free for you to do, and it takes a few seconds to click the button, but it's a massive, massive deal for me. So thank you for that in advance, and thank you to all those that have already subscribed. You've been watching The Ghost Hour. Tune back in and we'll take a look at a second 2,500 point army list.